Hi, everyone, and welcome to our final Be There event of the year, our December Be There event. Today, we have Andrew Pullman, our Chief Marketing Officer, and special guest, Senior Advisor at the STRATMOR Group, Sue Woodard. I'm Ashley Dennison, your Sales Support Manager here at Stearns Lending. We've got an exciting agenda for you today. Just before we get into that, a couple of housekeeping items. So we will be recording the event. And we will post it in Snap for those of you who would like to go back and listen to it later. We also have a question box that you can utilize throughout the presentation. You can enter in any questions, and we will do our best to answer them during the presentation. But if we don't get to them, we will follow up with you in an email afterward. So I think that's it on my end. Without further ado, I will go ahead and pass things off to Andrew. So thank you so much for coming, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ashley, for kicking this off. I am just absolutely delighted. I think Sue is practically on my bucket list of people to have a conversation like this, primarily for two reasons. One, she's just fun to talk to, and two, an absolute expert in this space, in particular within mortgage. So first, again, welcome to everybody. Both clients and prospects alike, and those of you in the industry, and even some of our own employees as well that join this call. As we're going along, please type in any questions, and what we'll try to do is either A, wait on them if we know we're going to get to them, or two, I'll read them, probably screen them as well, Sue, and tee them up for you and see how many we can get to. And if we don't get to them during the call, of course, we'll follow up with people later as well. So again, as I said, so excited to be chatting with you. You and I have had lots of conversations around this topic for quite some time. So really interested in applying it to this space, and not to mention, you too have been part of the originator world. So this is not going to be an academic exercise that both you and I have actually talked to real customers, right? Taken real loan applications, right?
Absolutely.
And know what it means to provide great experience. And dare I say, I think there's times where I have provided not so great experience. So, first, would love to have you, give a little bit of background on what you've done, and especially around what you're doing lately on the client experience space, and then quickly pivot into how do we define this beast that we call client experience?
Well, let's do it. I'm super happy to be here. So, and it's been fun, like you said, even getting ready to do this event, because every time we have these conversations, both of us get so excited about this topic. And yes, to your point, I've actually, I have walked the walk and talked the talk. I actually started, actually, you want to ask, find out an interesting story, ask anybody how they got into the mortgage business, because nobody got into this in a normal way, right? And I was no exception. I was actually working in a credit union, and this is going back 31 years ago now. But I was working in a credit union, and we kept getting robbed. And finally, I was like, I got to go find a different, part of the credit union, a different branch to work in, because it was my roommate, one of my best friends, who got robbed at gunpoint the last time, and it was crazy. And the job that was open out in the burbs somewhere was a mortgage processor. And I was like, I don't know what that is, but I'll go try that. And so, yeah, and I fell in love with originating, though. I mean, that was really where my true love for the industry came. And so spent a lot of years originating and, working with referral partners, working with customers, working my database, and really, as I kind of graduated and evolved on to doing some different things in my career, I've never lost my love for the mortgage industry, because I think what we're doing is so incredibly important, right? We're building, we help people get into homes where their lives happen, and, we're building neighborhoods and communities, and these are, it's kind of a big deal. And so I'm never, have always loved this industry. I've evolved into, kind of moved into the vendor side and technology side. I think a lot of you probably know me over the last, 4 years, having done a lot of work with Total Expert. I'm doing now some consulting with STRATMOR, which has been really fun. And the thread that's run throughout my entire career, back literally from my early days as a processor, on through originating and doing sales training and managing, and into the vendor side of things, and working with a lot of different lenders, is customer experience, and really paying a lot of attention to what is the experience like for the customer, because it gets and you and I have talked about this, Andrew, I think especially when we go through markets like we've just been through, it's about speed, it's about efficiency, it's about getting people through as quick as you can, because you want to make, that becomes part of a great experience for a refinance customer. And it's part of how you can actually, make sure that you're serving as many people as you can, both to be able to serve them and be able to continue to build your business and your own wealth for your family. But I think it's taking on a different tone now as we're moving into a purchase market. Every time when I go out and talk with lenders or brokers right now and kind of say, okay, like, what's your strategy? Knowing that the market share, the market's going to shrink, right? Everybody's strategy is, well, I'm just going to increase my market share. I'm just going to get, more customers. I'm going to work with more people. I'm going to work with more referral partners. Well, not everybody can do that. There's not this, massive glut of new, there's certainly not more business coming in. There's going to be less business to go around this year. There's not a wave of new realtors coming. There's some, but again, gaining new market share means you're taking it from someone. And so our goal,
the math is pretty clear on that one, isn't it? Yeah.
It is. It's real clear. So our goal on this call, like you and I talked about, is to say, okay, how do we get your amazing group of folks that are part of the Stearns family, or maybe considering being part of the Stearns family, how do we ensure that you're the one who is actually growing your market share and gaining more referral partners, gaining more transactions, and not be one of the ones that is getting it taken away.
Yeah, I think that's a really important note about share. No matter who you look at, whether or not it's Fannie, Freddie, or MBA forecast, they're all down overall, but up on purchase, which I think is really interesting. And I think that's where there's some huge opportunity for those that are interested in that market. And if you're not, right, probably something to rethink. Of getting into that space. So let's back up maybe then a little bit on where do you start, right? Customer experience strikes me sometimes almost like the high school or college term paper, where you just don't know where to start and there's gridlock. So how do we first start on defining, what part of customer or client experience should we tackle? And what are some tips maybe on how I define that for myself?
Yeah, well, there's two truths that I'd start us off with. I think it's supposed to be like two truths and a lie, but I don't have a lie, so it's just two truths.
Okay. That's good.
Right?
We wouldn't want to start any bad behaviors on this call.
Right? No, but the two truths that I would say as you think about customer experience, and one thing maybe just to back up a second, all of the data is telling us, STRATMOR is really deep into the data, but just everything that I'm hearing from, the folks at Total Expert and all the great customers that they're working with, STRATMOR, it's, what you're hearing is that customer experience is the new battleground. Consumers' expectations are going up significantly. When you look at like NPS rates, the Net Promoter Scores, which is kind of a little bit of a generic way to measure customer satisfaction, they were actually fairly high in 2020 because I think everybody had that like we're all in it together vibe, and everybody was going to be saving bunches of money on their finance, right? That has gone down precipitously. I think we're not all in this together. The tone has changed a little bit. And so when you look forward to the shrinking market and all these, all of the data is saying that customers' expectations are going higher and customer experience is where it's at. So the two truths that I would say for where we start is that number one, realizing you already have a customer experience, right? It's not like, oh, you don't have one and now you need to go create one. You already have a customer experience. The question is it the one that you want? And I think particularly when we're coming out of this refinance, market, again, it was about speed, it was about efficiency, it was like, let's get them through. Purchase, when you're being very purchase centric, it's very different. It's a totally different transaction, totally different headset for your customer, but there's a lot of refinance muscle memory. So first truth is you already have an experience. It's just a matter of, is it intentional? And we're going to talk about some ways to, start attacking that. The second thing is that I think sometimes people make this harder than it needs to be. You're already an expert. You are an expert at customer experience because every single person that's listening to this, you are a customer of something. Lots of you are probably, have a mortgage, right? Went through the mortgage process, or your financial institution or anything. Innately, it feels good. It doesn't feel good. How you like to be treated as a customer, how you don't like to be treated. So you're all experts. And so those are kind of the truths. Because I think to your point, Andrew, and I think what you're getting at is sometimes people are like, oh my gosh, I don't even know where to start. The good thing is you already started. You already have the experience.
Yeah, right,
just about to want it.
Yep. Yeah. So one of the things that comes to mind, and I think I had them, I pulled this out for your benefit. There's these little things called sticky notes. These happen to be white sticky notes. And I've heard some folks talking about this concept of journey mapping. And again, without getting too complicated, would love your perspective on, is that a good place to start? And how might I do it without having to have a PhD in process management?
100%. And I love that you brought like your little pad of Post-it notes. I have mine right here. I have colored ones, but
I know,
but
much more boring. Yeah.
this is like number one, when, you know, the number one thing, like just very tactically, that I would tell people to do is map out your current customer experience, and do not overcomplicate this with, oh, I got to get Visio or some kind of software. No, you don't. You need Post-it notes, a Sharpie, and a big wall, right? And depending on where you're at and where your team is at, this is absolutely, you know, an exercise you should bring in, you know, different members from your team in and do. And map out what the experience is, from everything from being a lead. You know, what happens when somebody is first kind of a lead and they're just in your, you know, starting to get in your, you know, maybe in your database, and what does that feel like to be a lead? You know, where are the follow-ups? Where are the gaps? You know, what does it look like in process? What about your post-close? And I would do this for both your, you know, I mean, you could keep it super simple. Say, this is what it's like for refinance. This is what it's like for purchase. This is what it's like for a referral partner, because that's another group that we can't forget about. But 100% do this with Post-it notes on a wall, but be sure that you're doing it not from the operational standpoint, because the customer and referral partner, they don't care about the sausage making, right? So really put yourself in the customer's viewpoint. And hey, good on any of you that if you actually went through your own mortgage experience. I mean, Andrew, I think you and I both talked about this. We both have like purchased and or refinanced. It's fascinating to go through the experience and kind of be looking at it going, wow, this is what it feels like to be a customer.
Well, in fact, and it's a bit of, I get a bit obsessive about it, because one of the things I did just recently with my own refinance was saved a picture of every message that was sent to me, every document that was sent to me. And there, I would say there's some things that were very clear, but there were other things where I had to think about, is this really a document we want to go in front of somebody? And I think in addition to the sticky notes, that would be the one I would add, which is, you know, pick one process, right? A recent refi, a recent purchase, and print those emails that you sent to your customer. Print those documents that you received from your, that you sent, potentially we, you know, Stearns as a lender sent, and look at if that all makes sense from the eyes of the client, because we look at it and many of these things make perfect sense, right? I went through my closing, and you know, I've closed way too many mortgages in my life, but looking through the eyes of the customer, some of those things make absolutely no sense. And oftentimes they're easy things to tackle. Sometimes they're not, if they're, you know, required documentation. But yeah, I think the sticky note, and I would add, you know, emails and documents that you mail to the customer are really, really important. And I think the other thing which you mentioned, which I thought was helpful, was you don't need a lot of technology to do this. This feels like a little bit like a do-it-yourself show, right? You don't need expensive tools to do this kind of stuff, right? You can just get your team together, find a big wall, mess up the conference room for a few weeks. And there's an old saying, and I forget who I need to ascribe it to, but just by measuring things, you're automatically going to get better.
That's right.
Yeah.
And the other thing too, that the cool thing about going through this exercise, and you may have gone through this exercise before, this is actually something you should do at least once a year, if not more often, is do this exercise. But if you haven't done it before, you know, going through this exercise and then, you know, looking at it, number one, you find out where the gaps are, for one thing, because in a lot of cases, again, when you pull yourself away from what's happening operationally and you pull yourself up to, but what is the customer getting? You actually realize in some cases there's big gaps where they're not hearing anything. And on a purchase, people are freaking out. They're waking up in the middle of the night wondering what's going on, right? I mean, you almost can't over communicate. So you notice where those gaps are. The other thing that you gain is that if you do, I mean, even if you take a picture of it, or if you capture it, or if you, put it into, you can just put it into a spreadsheet or a Word doc, or something super simple. Or frankly, we did this exercise once at Total Expert. We left it on the wall. Like we like left it because it was so interesting, and we could keep kind of playing with it. But I would tell you that it also then becomes, an artifact that you have that you can then level up from, where you're not starting from scratch every single time, and you're not starting from scratch now. Again, you have an experience. Just, do you know what it is? Are there gaps, and how can you improve it?
Right. So let's go back, or maybe let's go one click down again. We're going to pretend as though this whole journey map is up on the wall, and luminary Sue Woodard walks in and says, hey, before we even get started, these are the top 3 things you better be doing during your, and I'll separate it, maybe it's too blunt of an instrument, but these are the few things that you really should be doing during the originations process. And here's a few things that are during the fulfillment process. And if you want to throw in post-close, I guess that's a little of both, right? Both, originations and fulfillment.
Yeah.
But help get us jump started with a few things that you've seen in the market that
Totally
could be doing, and maybe everybody's not doing so well.
Yes, I can tell you some very specific things.
Okay.
I would tell you, first of all, in the lead stage, there is, and this is one that, as an originator, this was a huge mistake I made. I think I told you the story. I remember I would
tell us again. I'll pretend it's the first time I've heard it.
Okay, and you'll like laugh. Okay. Hilarious. It's not that funny, but I do remember. I mean, I did a terrible job of following. Like, somebody would call me, and I kind of walk through an analysis, whether for a refinance or for pre-approval, and I had my color coded system. I was like super organized, but then I would just file them away, and and wait for them to call back. Right. And I was busy off doing the next set of things. But I mean, it occurred to me, like, I remember one day looking at this massive drawer going, hey, I bet some of those people went somewhere else. Like, and they had, right? Because I had literally not followed up. And so I would say, in the lead part of it, especially knowing it is going to be more competitive, and that there are people that hopefully aren't on this call that are out there somewhere, your competitors, who are figuring out how they are going to take your customers and your leads and people in your database away from you. Okay. So you don't want that to happen. So I would tell you, in the lead phase, make sure that you are using, and again, Andrew, I'm a huge believer in utilizing technology and automation, but use, whatever tools that you have, use your tools to be able to stay in contact with those leads a little more often than you think you probably actually need to. It's people are at massive numbers are doing what they call multi-apping, meaning they're checking out lots of different places. Right. And so, and in some cases, they're not trying to shop. They're just like, they're on Zillow, and they're doing this with their thumb, and before they know it, they've applied for a mortgage accidentally. Right. So, So in the lead process, I'd say it's just that don't go dark on them. Okay. During the process itself, I think one of the most important things up front, Andrew, and you and I talked about this a bit the other day, is really setting those expectations up front. We recently did some really interesting workshops at STRATMOR. And it's literally like a recurring theme that comes up all the time, is like, it is so important to set those expectations up front, because we know we know generally how the story goes. We know every chapter, it's like this, the title, the appraisal, the processing, the underwriting, we have to remember, our customers don't know this story. This is a thriller for them, right? And they don't know all the different steps and things that are going to happen, right? And so it's setting expectations up front and really educating people, and remembering that even if they've gone through this before, this is not something normal for people. This is like something that it's emotional. If it's a purchase, it's kind of something very different. They're thinking about their dream house, their family. A life event might be happening, somebody's gotten married or divorced, or kids been born, or there's all this stuff going on. So the education up front, and then the setting expectations up front. And I shared with you one of the things that I did when I was originating that I've been talking to people about lately, is I used to give people a list up front of, here's 39 things that could go wrong. Right. And it wasn't to scare them, but it was to educate them, and also let them know there's all kinds of moving parts. That's why you're working with a pro like me, right? Is because I've been through every single one of these 39 things dozens of times. I'm going to help you through all of these, but not all these things are in my control. Maybe there's gonna be something funky on the title. Maybe your appraisal is going to come back with an issue, but here's all of the things. The other thing that would do, so number one, it reaffirmed me as as their their advisor and their expert. It did give them a heads up that there's a lot of moving parts. This is why you're working with a pro. But it also allowed me later on to call them and, hey, remember that list of 39 things? It's number 17. So this is what just happened. Now let's dig into this, and I'm going to help you, work through this. So expectation setting. Just to give you one more real specific example, place where there's a ton of friction, is the transfer to servicing. And even though, at that point, technically somebody could say, well, I'm done with them at that point, right? The closing has happened. I'm, going to get my check. I mean, I know the people that you have, again, in your family that are working with you, it's about customer for life, right? I mean, when I was originating, man, it was my database and my referral partners. That's where all my business came from, right? And so if you're not looking at it, that even though the transaction has closed, this is your next best source of referrals, of repeat business. But the transfer to servicing it's really important to do a very good job of set expectations for that customer on here's what's going to happen. Even if you have, you have no idea, probably where that servicing is going to, nor should you need to, but preparing your customer for that, because they suddenly feel like, what? Like now I'm off with, I heard a story the other day where a customer got really upset because they got transferred for servicing to an institution that they had very strong emotional feelings about, and they weren't good ones, right? And so warning people that this is going to happen, and it doesn't, I'm still with you, I'm still going to, over time, I'm going to stay in touch with you. I'm going to educate you if you've got questions, but letting them know that's going to happen so they don't feel like, what the heck, you just dumped me off into the wild. Yeah. That's another real specific example of something. Shore up your communications around that. Right.
Yeah. And by the way, thanks for, this term broker or customer for life is really important to us. And especially those brokers that are on now, right? Our commitment has been that if you close a loan through us, that client belongs to you, right? And not to anyone else within our family of brands. And I think it's really important that experience is really important in helping them make that decision. And on the fulfillment side, right? Interesting you brought up the servicing side as well. I have heard a stat, and maybe it came from the great work at STRATMOR, that regardless of how great the originations, let's call it, forgive the term, the sales process or the application process is, that if it falls apart in fulfillment, that blows up NPS, that blows up any referral possibilities. So thoughts on how to make sure that the communication and the experience is good there. Because the other thing, which I know I saw from STRATMOR, was there's these troughs where everybody's working hard, lots of stuff going on in operations, in fulfillment, and there's actually nothing wrong, but the client doesn't hear anything, right? And so suddenly the worry meter starts to tick up. So thoughts on how to mitigate some of that, and best ways, how to communicate, when to communicate, how often, things like that.
Yes, yeah, totally. One of the things I'll mention, just so I don't lose track of it, but one of the interesting findings that STRATMOR got over the past, they've done hundreds of thousands of borrower surveys. So there's a wealth of amazing data. But one of the big things that has come up over the past 12 months that is the number one thing that craters the NPS, or the customer's satisfaction and willingness to want to repeat and refer business, is when they perceive you have asked for the same document twice. It just inflames people. I mean, it like your NPS is going off of a cliff when you do that, right? Now, in many cases, you haven't actually asked for the same document twice. Your bank, statement expired, and so you need to get a fresh one, or some, for whatever reason, right? Right. I mean, again, having done this myself, I know. But I would highly, highly advise that people set this expectation again up front with people, that it may feel to you like we are going to ask for the same things twice. We're not. Here's what our goal is. Here's what we're working towards. So I totally get it if it feels that way, and by all means, do everything possible not to ever actually ask for the same document twice. Literally, people lose their minds about that. And it's interesting. I mean, it was interesting what a response that it got. I mean, a very like massive response out of customers. So I think, that's obviously just a really, huge piece. I think the other part of it, just when you're talking about like during that operations piece, two things. Number one, when we've talked about mapping out that customer journey, really looking for where those gaps are, where the negative space is during the transaction. Because particularly if it's a purchase, and let's say it's new construction, oh my God, it's like, God knows how long this possibly could be, right? These transactions can be very long. You can't let weeks go by with nothing happening, because again, we have to remember the story of the purchase loan is a thriller for people. This is the movie we've seen 18,000 times, and been there, done that. I know exactly how this ends. It is not that way at all for the customer. And so you have to look for not just what communications are we having, but where are there places that we're falling silent, that we need to even just tell the person, there's nothing to report, good news, nothing to report, nothing exciting is happening right now.
Right.
But I just wanted to reach out and just let you know that. And again, this is where technology can really come into play and help, because these aren't things that you need to do manually, right? You want to automate all of the things that you can, so that you can, elevate you to be available as a human being when that person needs you, but don't let too long go with that silence. The other thing I would say is just really developing a great relationship with your operations partners. Having started on the operations side of the business as a processor, there's a lot of contact potentially. I mean, depending on how your shop works and how your setup works, but really having a great appreciation and understanding. The ops people, and I'm sure everybody knows this, they are just as tired as everybody, on the origination side. They probably weren't compensated in the same way, nor do they sometimes get that, the thrill of the closing and the taking the pictures and, oh my God, you're so amazing. Like, so really pay attention to those, to your operations partners, understand their world, show them some empathy as well. Think about what is your operations partner journey with you? Like, do you do anything to show your appreciation? Because they can help be your partner in communication during the process.
Right. All right. So in the last few minutes that we have left, I'm going to do a speed round with you. And
Okay.
it will be a question like, what do you think, and anything else you want to say about it? So first topic is texting. Where do you stand on texting customers in particular, before, during, after the process, and any tips?
So yes, and yes. So
Okay.
again, recent data shows, and this is different. This is different right now than it was about a year ago. Phone calls were the highest and best, whatever. Texting is now what customers want. They do not want phone calls unless they're looking for you to call them back. But don't leave me, it's just like any of us. Our customers are people, right? Somebody can send me a text message, we can be talking all day, but I pick this up and I see a 3-minute long voicemail. I'm like, oh Lord,
Delete.
text people. And so follow whatever rules that you need to as far as texting goes.
Opt
But
in.
yes,
Yep.
yes to text.
Next one, we've gotten really used to this right here, video, and a lot of phone. How important is getting back to face-to-face? And are there any, customer segments that maybe want that more than others? Thoughts on getting back to safely interacting with people face-to-face?
Yes, I would say that there certainly are, regionally, you've got to follow whatever's happening in your world, right? And so, but yes, I do think, remembering that a purchase is, it's emotional, like you and I talked about, like, should you go to closings and things like that? Obviously follow whatever the rules of your company and your state and, and your own comfort levels are, as far as that goes. But we are in a very this is a human business. It's person to person. And so there is something different. It's like, Andrew, as much as we had coffee the other morning like this and it was cool, but would I rather had a Starbucks in my hand and actually been sitting at a table with you? Yeah, and so I would take those opportunities, with your best referring, clients, with your referral partners, with, and find those opportunities to get face to face, assuming, they're willing, you are, all that good stuff. I think nothing, especially when you're building a partnership, nothing is as good as face to face. However, I will say, that I'm a huge fan of video. And there is something like called digital eye contact, where it tends to have some of the same feeling for people. So I also wouldn't move away from all the places you can add video to your communications. It can feel very personal. I'm a huge fan of BombBomb. Like, utilize tools like this because it feels personal. So it's kind of the next best thing to actually being face-to-face.
Right. The last one, and I think you hit on it. Are you an advocate of going to your client's closing?
I would say, I'm not going to say hard or fast one way or the other, because I would say do what your region and your business style dictates. Because back, when I was originating for a long time, absolutely, I went to every single closing, and then I kind of got to a place where I didn't go to every single closing, but that was okay. I kind of had my things that I was doing that were really carefully crafted in the customer experience to get them ready to go to that closing and after. I think it just has a lot to do with your business style. I would say when in doubt, and if you can, yes, because especially on a purchase, your referral partner is there. It's a chance for you to show up and be, again, belly to belly, face to face, with these folks that there's other people calling on all your referral partners right now. Whoever your best folks are, somebody else is pinging them. Somebody else is saying, hey, I can do this. So if you can get in front of those folks, or even start a new relationship with a referral partner at a closing, if you've got the time, do it.
Awesome. Hey, I went through a lot of things on my checklist. Anything else that you think we should cover or our viewers should know about?
I guess the last thing I would say is that, some new numbers just came out from Black Knight about the tappable equity. So now it's record levels. Tappable equity is how much equity people can take out of their homes and still be at an 80% loan to value. The latest numbers are, or maybe it's CoreLogic, anyways, $9.4 trillion of tappable equity. So what I would say is, because I know that at Stearns I know you've got incredible products. Your jumbo stuff right now is off the hook, like both the pricing and products, right?
Yes.
You've got really good cash out refinance options as well. I do know this. And so as much as we are shifting to really focus on purchase and a lot of the journey mapping and things that I'm talking about, like prioritize purchase, there still is a lot of refinancing to do out there. And what that means to you is you've got something to talk to every single person in your database about, right? So I would that would be one thing that I would leave is, and this is why, it's why you're working with Stearns. It's why you're coming to calls like this. I mean, Stearns actually cares about what your broker experience is as a customer of Stearns. That's why, these are all educational, but they're also putting the things in place, the tools, the products, the programs, the pricing, the things, the team that you need, your account executives, so that you can succeed in this market that requires a pivot.
Awesome. Well, this has been great. I have three takeaways from this conversation. One, I've knocked off one thing from my bucket list. I still need to get to the top of Everest and the bottom of the Mariana Trench. So those two are still to-dos. And the other ones, the two ones were, one, you already have a client experience, whether or not you know it or not, whether or not you like it or not. And two, it don't need to make this harder than it needs to be, right? Just get started. Grab some of your colorful sticky notes and a wall and your team and start mapping out the process in your document. So thank you so much for all the wisdom you've shared with us, Sue. It's been a treat. And for everybody out there on the call, thank you for joining us. Look forward to providing more calls like this in the future. If you are interested in more information, please contact your account executive, or if you're not doing business with us yet, please visit stearnswholesale.com for more information, and look for on social both some snippets from this conversation and a link to the whole conversation if you just didn't get enough and want to watch it again. So again, thank you, Sue. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Appreciate you. And hopefully we'll chat again soon. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.